Roth conversions can save you an enormous amount of money in taxes over the lifetime of a portfolio. In fact, it's not uncommon to see a savings of over $1 million. But few people know how to decide if they should do a Roth conversion, and fewer people know how to calculate their potential savings. So in this video, I'm going to walk through an actual case study to demonstrate the dramatic tax savings. It's really remarkable from doing a Roth conversion strategy, and I'm going to give you access to the software that I use to model it out. In addition, I want to give you a framework to help you decide whether you should do a Roth conversion and give you some critical factors that you should consider. But first, my name's Kevin Lum. I'm a certified financial planner, and this channel is dedicated to helping 1 million people retire without worry. Before I get into the weeds or get into the details and kind of walk you through a case study, let's first start by talking about what a Roth conversion is. So a Roth conversion is where you take money from a tax-deferred account and you move it into a tax-free account. Think traditional IRA to Roth IRA. And for most retirees, the bulk of their wealth is going to be in a tax-deferred account. Probably most of your money is in a tax-deferred account. And it can end up creating a massive tax issue for you later in retirement. Why? Well, accounts will continue to grow, and at some point, the government is going to force you to take out the dreaded required minimum distribution. And the money you pull out of the tax-deferred account is going to be taxed as ordinary income, just like your paycheck. And the big issue for retirees is that those withdrawals often raise your income to levels where your Social Security is taxed, and in some cases, it can cause higher Medicare premiums as well, not to mention that it's pushing you into a higher tax bracket later in life when you want to be paying less in taxes, not more. So what can you do about it? You have a couple of options. You can withdraw money from your tax-deferred account early and just spend that money, which might make sense for some people. Some of you, it's not going to make sense doing a Roth conversion, and so you just want to very smartly withdraw money from your tax-deferred account, your 401k, or your traditional IRA, and just live on it. But for others of you, you want to consider converting, taking the money outside of that tax-deferred account, the 401k, with the traditional IRA, and you want to convert that money to a Roth IRA. This is what's known as a Roth conversion. Now, when you do a Roth conversion, you're going to have to pay tax today. So if you pull out $50,000 out of your 401k and move it to a Roth IRA this year, you're going to have to pay tax on a $50,000 of extra income. But in exchange, you get tax-free growth for the next 30 or 40 years with no required minimum distribution. This conversion could save you a fortune in taxes over the long run, particularly if you believe that taxes are going to continue to go up over the course of your retirement. So the question is the trade-off worth it in your specific situation? So today we're going to walk through an actual client to help you see the dramatic tax savings that conversion can provide when done strategically. But before we do that, I want to give you a framework or some critical questions to ask yourself to help you decide whether you should do a Roth conversion. So the first thing you need to consider is, what's my current tax bracket? Because when you do a Roth conversion, you're going to pay tax on that conversion at your current tax bracket. And if you're already in a high tax bracket, that conversion could just push you into an even higher tax bracket. And so you need to determine if the conversion makes sense immediately or if you should wait until your income drops. This is why I often recommend that people retire a bit early before Social Security kicks in, so they can begin to do Roth conversions at the lowest income threshold possible. So you want to think about, what's my current tax bracket, and then what is my future tax bracket going to be? So the first thing you want to think about is, what are my tax brackets? The second thing you want to think about is your asset allocation. If you have all of your money currently inside of treasuries and it's growing at 5% a year, it's not going to make as much sense for you to do a Roth conversion, because there's not going to be nearly as much growth in that portfolio as if, say, you have a balanced equity portfolio with a lot of stock that has a lot of long-term growth potential. Because you're going to pay money today to do that conversion. So let's say you convert $50,000 and you put it into a Roth IRA. If that account isn't growing much, that conversion isn't going to be worth that much to you over the life of your retirement. On the other hand, if you have an account that's growing 7, 8, 9, 10% a year, it's going to double every 7 to 10 years, well, then that Roth conversion becomes much more valuable to you over the life of your retirement. The third thing you need to think about is the duration. How long does the money have to grow? If you're 80 years old, it probably doesn't make sense to do a Roth conversion. On the other hand, if you're 62 it makes much more sense to potentially consider a Roth conversion. The fourth thing you need to think about is charity. If you're thinking about leaving a chunk of your 401k or your traditional IRA to a charity, then that Roth conversion might not make as much sense for you. The fifth thing you want to think about is, will this conversion trigger a stealth tax, such as the taxation of your Social Security benefits or increased Medicare premiums, or will it impact your ACA subsidies? So these are all things you want to think about when you're thinking about making this conversion, because it's the amount that you convert each year is going to increase your income for that year. So if you convert $50,000, it's going to show as $50,000 in income. And so you want to do a careful analysis to weigh the benefits of a conversion versus the negative impact in that year of doing the conversion. So you want to do a really careful analysis to decide, do the benefits outweigh the negative impacts, the stealth tax that it could potentially end up causing you? For many of you, if you do it early, it will actually help you avoid a stealth tax later on. But for some of you, it could end up causing that stealth tax today. And so you just want to do an analysis of that and ask the question, do the benefits outweigh the cost? Another question is, do you have enough cash to pay for the taxes from another bucket to allow the Roth IRA to grow? So do you have enough money maybe in your taxable brokerage account to pay for the taxes on that Roth conversion to allow you to maximize the benefit of that conversion? And then the next thing you want to think about is the heirs tax rate. So the people who might inherit your money. Converting can reduce taxes for your heirs if they're inheriting your traditional IRA. But if they're in a much lower tax bracket and you're in a high tax bracket, it might make sense to just leave it alone and let your heirs pay the taxes in the future. So with that as a background, let's look at Phil and Claire Dunphy again. If you watched our video on withdrawals, we are using the exact same scenario. In fact, if you haven't watched that video, I'm going to link to it at the end of this video, and I'd really recommend going back and watching that video. Okay, so here we have Phil and Claire. Let's look. They have about $500,000 in their taxable account with $250,000 of capital gains. They have $500,000 in a 401k, $100,000 in a Roth IRA, and then another $300,000 in another 401k for Claire. So they only have about $800,000 in tax-deferred accounts, which is fairly normal. In fact, maybe on the light end for a lot of retirees. But so with that in mind, let's go over to the next tab, which is the tax tab. And so we looked at this before. We looked at the distributions, and we looked at the difference that it could make over the life of the portfolio doing taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free. And if you remember, we looked at the details, and we could see that basically they paid $0 in federal income tax during these years. Now, they may have had to pay some state tax depending on their situation and what state they lived in. I'll show you a tab to look at that in a minute. We kind of see that the situation is they're in the 10% tax bracket for a long time. They basically pay $0 on all the taxable income that they pull out. And then they eventually, once they start pulling from their tax-deferred accounts, they're now in the 15% federal tax bracket. And then if you watch, as they begin to progress in their retirement and that account value grows, and then they start taking RMDs, that amount continues to grow until where they're eventually in the 25% tax bracket. And if you want to really get geeky with this, you can just click here, download the document into a spreadsheet, and then you can calculate the exact amount of tax that's projected just from the federal income tax. It's a significant amount of money over the life of their portfolio. So now we're going to come back over here, and we're going to look. We set the estimated terminal tax rate. So that's the amount of money that their heirs will have to pay in taxes, or the estimated amount of money that their heirs will have to pay in taxes. If you see here, we've got conversion target, we've got the ordinary income tax bracket, and then we've got fill the tax bracket. So as you know, whenever you earn income, on the first amount of income you earn, you're in like the 10% tax bracket, and then the 12%, and then the 22% and 24%, and so on. You can earn up to a certain amount of money before you bump over into the next tax level. And so on the first bit of money that you convert, you're only going to pay, let's say, 10%, and then the next chunk of money you're going to pay 12%, and then the next chunk of money you might pay 22%, or whatever the case might be. So what you can do here is you can adjust the bucket or the bracket that you want to fill up. So here is the 12 to 15% tax bracket. And now what's really interesting to note is you'll see 12 and 15. The reason they have 12 and 15, 12 is the current tax bracket. 15 is what is going to increase to in 2026 unless Congress reauthorizes the 2017 tax bill. So taxes are going to go up a little bit in 2026 if nothing is done. So that's the reason you see a 12 and 15. So we look here, if we do Roth conversions to the top of that tax bracket, so we fill up just enough that we bump up against the top of the 12% tax bracket and no more, then we can see that over the life of the portfolio, it ends up saving us, or the total savings over the life of the portfolio, or the total additional amount of money with tax savings and everything, can be about $1.8 million. So as you'll notice, early on, they're in a slightly higher tax bracket. Instead of the 10%, they're in 15% tax bracket. But then they have almost no tax to pay for the rest of their retirement because they've converted the money from that traditional IRA or 401k to the Roth IRA. So all the future growth is tax-free. There were no required minimum distributions. And then if you look, most of the conversions are done by the time they turn age 70, not quite, which now if they delay taking their Social Security at age 70, most of their future Social Security payments will also not be subject to tax, which is a huge savings over the life of their portfolio. So let's go back to the distribution. Let's go back to the calibration. And let's see if we bump up to the next tax bracket. So as you notice, going up to the next tax bracket actually has a negative impact. And this is why it is so important to be very strategic. Now, it's going to be different for every single person. Sometimes when I'm messing with this, I'm able to go up to 22 or even up to the 32% tax bracket, and still it make a larger impact. In fact, you can see for them, it's slightly better to go to 32 than it is to just do the 24%. And there's 100 different reasons why this could be. So here we're going to stay. Looks like the sweet spot for Phil and Claire is to fill up to that 12% tax bracket. But then we can also play around with this, and we're like, let's actually just have Phil and Claire convert over 5 years. So they're only going to do 5 years of conversions, and then they're going to stop. So as you can see, this actually could end up netting a bit more money over the life of their portfolio. But I'm going to go back and undo that. I'm just going to have it just do the conversion as normal. So 1.8 million. Now I want to go look. We can kind of look at the details. You can see what their tax bracket is, and you can basically see that after the age of 72, they're not going to have any, really after the age of 71, there's almost no more federal tax to pay through the rest of retirement, and it saves their Social Security from being taxed for most of the retirement. So now we can go over to this other tab. We can look at cash flows, look at summary. You can see they've got tax payments all the way to here, and then we can actually look and see how much is federal and how much is state, because the other tab just looks at federal. And then we can basically see that they will pay any more taxes for the rest of the retirement. And so if you were to dig down and look at the actual numbers, and in fact, you can download some of this data to run it, what you'd find is that Phil and Claire saved over $1 million in taxes by making these Roth conversions. Essentially what they did is they were able to use the first few years of retirement. So, they retired at age 61, Social Security is still not going to kick in for a while. And so they used those years where they had an incredibly low tax rate to begin doing Roth conversions, getting money out of that 401k, putting it in the IRA, using the funds from their taxable account to both help fund their living expenses and also cover some of the taxes. And by doing that, they're really able to increase the viability of their retirement plan. Roth conversions can generate dramatic tax savings for most people, but smart analysis is required to see if converting is going to pay off based on your unique financial situation. Now, some of you, it's not going to make sense to do a Roth conversion, but you may still want to withdraw money from your tax-deferred account from that 401k or that IRA up to a certain level and just put it in your bank account and get as much money out of that tax-deferred account as possible early in retirement before Social Security kicks in. Because if you wait until Social Security kicks in before you are required to take out those distributions, it could end up causing your Social Security to be taxed and just reduce the amount of money that you have to live on. So what questions do you have about doing strategic Roth conversions? Let me know in the comments. And then also I've linked to the software. Some of you have already set up accounts. I've linked to the software that I use to set this up. Give me about 24 hours to turn access on to the tax estimates. And also I should just give a disclaimer. I'm not creating a financial plan for you. You are playing with these tools on your own. It actually took me years to figure out how to fully use these tools and all the different things you can play with. And there's a ton of variables that I haven't gone into, but hopefully this will at least get you thinking about the impact that a Roth conversion and the withdrawal strategy can make on the long-term viability of your retirement plan. Thanks for watching. And as always, if you would be willing to share this with your friends and your family, anyone you think that might be interested, it means a lot to me.